Come on. Oh my god. It's looking good. It's looking good. It's looking good. Come on. Yeah. Pride. Yo guys, what is up? Max in our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my updated guide for Freyna. Now, I want something to be very clear before we get into this video. This is a bit more of an informational guide about what you can start doing to prepare for Ultimate Freyna coming out, rather than something that I want you to follow directly, because obviously Ultimate Freyna is dropping very soon. I don't think it's worth putting any more catalysts or activators or anything into Freyna right now, because her ultimate version is about to come out. But I've learned so much about her from playing her. My Freyna is now fully catalyzed, but I've not been able to like super min-max my build because of the restrictions on build diversity right now, where you have to like stick to the restraints of your mobbing build on your bossing build, because if you catalyze one slot, you catalyze all of them. That is going to be changing in Season 1. And so I want to take the time in this video to explain how you would optimally build Freyna, her best weapons, her best reactors, her best components, so that you have a updated guide for what you can start looking for and hunting for when she comes out. And then obviously when she does drop, I will have a full Ultimate Freyna guide. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is actually her best in slot weapon. Now, my original Freyna guide, I posted, I think in the first like few weeks, I talked about using the Fallen Hope. The Fallen Hope is a very cool weapon. It is not a very good weapon right now. It just needs some buffs, and maybe it'll become Freyna's best in slot weapon when she gets dropped and they buff it. But right now, the whole gimmick of the Fallen Hope is its ability to cause poison explosions. Well, now with a fully built Freyna, we have enough poison explosions. The Fallen Hope is not really adding anything to our mobbing capabilities. It doesn't do anything for bossing. The Python is still an interesting choice because it directly debuffs for our poison damage, and it'll make our poison ticks do more. So I still think the Python is a good weapon for Freyna. However, I do not think it's the best weapon. What I think is currently the best weapon for Freyna is the Secret Garden. Now, the Secret Garden has some caveats, and it's definitely a weapon that you're going to want to get 4 out of 4. I have my like last one crafting right now. But the thing about the Secret Garden is its pest control buff. At rank 5, this is going to be a 50% trigger rate whenever we use a tech skill. Freyna has 3 tech skills, her 1, her 3, and her 4. This gun does not work for her 4. We'll explain that in a second. But whenever you proc her pest control buff, you're going to get increased firearm attack and skill power. For your subsequent stacks, you're going to get increased skill power. So you're getting over like 35% skill power if you get rank 3 of this, which is what Freyna needs right now. Freyna, when you fully build her out, has the AoE to cover an entire map in poison. Her changes to her like range were actually fantastic. We'll showcase that in a second. But she needs more damage is kind of the big thing that she's lacking. And the ability to just click your buttons, use her skills, and stack up more base damage or more skill power is really, really great on her. Not to mention the Secret Garden is one of the stronger weapons in the game right now. It's got like a base crit chance of 50%, which is wild. And you can build this thing very comfortably for a crit damage build. It's just all around a solid weapon, and I do think it is Freyna's best in slot weapon. I do want to mention once again that this pest control buff does not work for her 4. Her 4 pulls out this big new weapon, and as soon as you pull it to 4, you lose your buff. It does not snapshot. It does not carry over to the 4. It works exactly the same way as Lepic's 4, where if you click Lepic 4, this does not carry over. That's why we don't use the Secret Garden on Lepic, because pest control does not affect it. The next thing I really want to mention is the buffs that they did to Freyna. Now, when they buffed Valby, they buffed Blair, they also buffed Freyna. Freyna was the only one that really received a meaningful buff because they buffed her base range. And they buffed the range of her Room Zero Trauma. Now, Room Zero Trauma is Freyna's unique debuff that she inflicts onto enemies. It is the start of her damage. It is not the main part of her damage. The way that Freyna's kit works is that you apply Room Zero Trauma to an enemy, and then that enemy that is infected with room 0 trauma will apply poison to nearby enemies. And if you look at our like base modifiers, room 0 trauma has a 10% modifier and poison has a 60% modifier. So our whole goal is to apply room 0 trauma, which will then impact or apply poison, which does way more damage. And the fact that room 0 trauma now has a bigger AoE allows for a bigger AoE for poison to be applied to enemies. This is a massive buff to her mobbing capabilities, and I was kind of shocked at how good it is, actually, because it doesn't work properly where, like, you can see that I'm wearing a bunch of range mods, but my radius is not actually going up. But just to give you an idea, this is an enemy. He's all the way over here. This is another enemy, and I did not think that Freyna would have the range for this, but I'm going to apply my 1 to this Farseer. You can see that's the room 0 trauma, and that's the poison icon. So this enemy all the way over here is still getting poisoned from our damage. And this allows Freyna to really like do a lot of AoE because now that her room 0 trauma is buffed, her ability to spread damage is massively improved. For the mods in the Secret Garden, my build is obviously not finished, and the way that you'd build this thing is a little bit different for other characters besides Freyna. This weapon is best in slot on a few characters. For example, Ajax loves this weapon, but the big things you really want to focus on early is just getting your crit hit rate and crit hit damage. Getting some fire rate is great. More mag size. This thing starts with a massive magazine. I think it's like 50 base magazine, so getting more in the mag is just super nice quality of life. We're going for, as our final mods that I plan to put on this thing are going to be Inside Focus for more crit hit rate and damage, and also Toxic Conductor. When attacking enemies inflicted with poison, we get even more attack. This is obviously a Freyna specific mod, wouldn't use this on anyone else, but if you're looking for a base to go for the Secret Garden, the real big things that you're trying to grab super early are probably just these core mods. Get your fire rate, get your base damage, and then get your crit mods, and this thing will be absolutely cooking for you. To pair with that for your reactor, you're going to want for mobbing, you're going to look for a Secret Garden mounting with toxic and tech, and then ideally you're getting skill effect range in either a tech boost or a toxic boost. Doesn't overly matter. You do not need a Secret Garden mounting for bossing because, once again, it does not apply to your bossing damage. For bossing, you're specifically going to want Gold Colossus damage. Mine looks like this right now. It's got additional damage when attacking a Colossus, and then in a perfect world, this would be skill crit damage. Boost ratios are good there. Skill crit chance is good there. But you really, really want to find additional damage when attacking a Colossus. It's a huge damage improvement for Freyna. We'll talk about the like bossing specific like mods in a second when we get to our bossing, but just note that you definitely want damage when attacking a Colossus for her bossing reactor. Now, showing on screen is our mobbing build for Freyna, and there's some important pieces that I want to call out. First off, we are using Decimator. Decimator allows us, whenever we defeat an enemy that is inflicted with a debuff, to stack up skill power modifier. This goes up to 50% modifier, and on Freyna, all of her poison and dots are going to be counting as debuffs, so we're just constantly getting 50% more modifier. Now, modifier is very, very important on Freyna. There's a lot of builds that I've done for other Descendants where we don't really use a lot of modifier, and that is because modifier is conditionally important. Skill power is almost always important. And what I mean by that is, for example, on Freyna, at base, her room 0 trauma is 10% skill power modifier, right? So we're taking whatever our skill power is, and we're going to do 10% of that to enemies. If I get 10% skill power modifier extra on a mod, I am doubling her damage. I'm drastically improving her damage with only 10%. Versus if I have 10% more modifier on Lepic's 4 ability, which already does 4,000% modifier, I'm not gaining anything from that. I'm only getting 10% on top of 4,000 versus on Freyna, I could get 10% on top of 10%. So modifier is king when we're building around Freyna. Modifier in general is really good on just dot Descendants, but on Freyna in particular, her modifiers are pretty low, so we're going to want as much as possible. So Decimator is super, super great for that. Another thing that's really great for that is Tech Master. This is the first time I've featured a master mod on a build. Tech Master is a battle mod. We're going that instead of like Tech Specialist or Focus on Tech because it's going to give us skill power, which is great. But the Tech skill power modifier, in addition, is actually going to give us more damage. Now, obviously, this is a mobbing build. We're not going to be focusing on something like the 4 for mobbing. Our 4 is still going to hit really hard. And if we wanted to build around the 4, then something like focus on tech or focus on tech, toxic specialist, those kind of mods that increase our actual power would be better. But for her like mobbing setup, I'm really focusing on being able to spam her 1 and 3, which are both low modifier abilities. So Tech Master is going to be our best in slot. We tested this against both Toxic Specialist and Focus on Toxic, and Tech Master was overall more damage for our abilities, so that's why we're using Tech Master. In addition, we're going to make sure that we grab Iron Defense. This is even more modifier, and it gives us more survivability, and our 2 scales off of defense. So the more defense that we have, the more effective our 2 is going to be. So Iron Defense helps us out be tanky a ton. We are going to be using Tech Specialist here. Now, Tech Specialist gives us a ton of modifier. It's not as much modifier as something like Skill Simplification. However, Skill Simplification, we lose 25% of our max MP for only like 8% more modifier. If you wanted to min-max this and do even more damage, you could swap this Skill Simplification out for Tech Specialist. In terms of like how I'm doing this right now, I really need these like triangle slots for her bossing, because for bossing, we're going to need crit, and crit is triangle slots. And so right now, I'm going to be using Tech Specialist over Skill Simplification. I still think this is a good move, but once we have Ultimate Freyna out and we're able to catalyze different slots, that could possibly change. Now, the other things that we're going to be using is MP Conversion. MP Conversion is going to give us a lot of cooldown. You'll note that we need a little bit more cooldown. And in like a perfect world, we'd be swapping out Venom Cinctium for Nimble Fingers. Nimble Fingers would allow us to have extra cooldown. The reason more cooldown is important is because, one, we get to use our abilities more, but also we are going to be using the Secret Garden. The Secret Garden has a buff with the duration, with a chance to proc, and so the more cooldown that we have, the more we get to use our abilities, and the more uptime we're going to have of the Secret Garden special ability. So that is why that is so nice. The next thing to talk about is range. We want as much range as possible for mobbing. The max range of Freyna's Room Zero Trauma is 300%. It is right now, we're at 186%. That's 100%. We have like 100% base. So we're actually at 286%. So we're sitting pretty close to maximize range with a range roll on our reactor. We don't really need much more range. But the reason range is so important is because it's going to allow us to spread our poison more effectively. Yes, maximize range does come with a negative modifier, but I think it's worth for mobbing in order to like have as many enemies as poisoned as possible. And I kind of want to give you a demonstration of this real quick. So now we've replaced the maximize range with amplification control. This gives us 50% range. It's still like 40% less range than maximize range, but obviously no downside to our damage, but it's quite noticeable difference. Now, if we infect that exact same enemy and there's the enemy the exact same distance away, we are no longer poisoning them. With our build currently, we have enough damage to kill enemies that we are poisoning. So we're just killing less enemies, even though it is a little bit less damage. If there was harder content in the game right now where we would need to squeak out even more damage, we could use amplification control. But as it is right now, anything that's going to get poisoned is, for the most part, besides like elites, dying. And so I think the extra range is necessary. The one kind of experimental mod that I'm messing around with on Freyna is Energy Collection. Now, if you're playing a Freyna solo, you want to use MP Collector. MP Collector reads whenever you defeat an enemy, instantly recover 12% of your max MP to 17% chance. This is best in slot to sustain your mana and cast as much as you want on Freyna. You don't have to use an MP mod. I just like them for the quality of life. Obviously, like with this build like perfected, as I said earlier, we'd be using Nimble Fingers here, and then you could use like Venom Cinctium for a little bit more damage, but MP Collector is really nice. The only issue with MP Collector is it requires you to kill enemies, and if you're playing in a group, Freyna does damage over time. She doesn't have the immediate damage that someone like a Viessa or a Bunny has. And so sometimes your kills can get stolen and then you don't have MP sustain. So energy collection is actually pretty nice on Freyna if you're playing in a group. This gives you MP recovery, which increases the MP that you get from energy blocks on the ground, but it also increases your MP regain from your passive MP. So right now, on my components, I've got MP recovery in combat. You can see that I'm regenning 0.28 MP in combat, and I'm regenning 0.3 out of combat. So I've basically got the same amount of MP recovery in combat. And what that allows me to do is, for example, I'm going to click my 1 here on this enemy. By the time my 1 comes off cooldown, you will see that even while in combat, I have fully refunded the cost of it. And this allows me to spam my abilities without energy collector, without MP collector, without having to get kills, but still use my abilities without actually having them cost basically anything, which is really, really good quality of life. Now, currently, there is one thing kind of bugged with this, or maybe it's not bugged, but if you take damage, that MP regen gets like staggered. So it pauses for a brief second, so that can make it a little bit less reliable. But if you are planning on using Freyna in groups, energy collection can actually be really nice, not only for the sustain from the blocks, but also just increasing your passive MP recovery while you're fighting enemies. If you want to use something like that, make sure you get MP recovery in combat on your sensor is super important. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and another reason why I'm so excited for Ultimate Freyna, is the changes to her change how effective Contagion is. So Contagion reads, when an enemy is inflicted with Room 0 trauma and is killed, there is a contagion of poison surrounding it. Now, when Room 0 trauma had half of the range, Contagion was super helpful to help spread the poison, which is the bulk of Freyna's damage. Now that Room 0 Trauma's AoE is massively buffed, Contagion, still her best mobbing Transcendent module, in my opinion, but it's not as useful. And so with Ultimate Freyna most likely launching with Ultimate exclusive Transcendent modules, there's actually a lot of room for potential crazy new Transcendent modules on her. With Ultimate Valby, for example, Supply Moisture is Supply Moisture. It's one of the strongest Transcendent modules in the game. I don't think Ultimate Freyna is going to have that same kind of issue where we're not going to be able to find anything better than Contagion. Because, like, for example, if I apply poison to this enemy and they're all getting poisoned, the, Contagion Explosion is still helping me spread, but I'm without it, the enemy at the very end is still getting poisoned and everything is dying. If I, for example, here take off Contagion, just to give you an idea. Now let's do the exact same thing without the Contagion module. Infect the one in the front. We've got all of the enemies that are down there getting poisoned and taking down. They are all dead. So Contagion, very helpful. Very nice mod, but I don't think it is going to be a must-use for Ultimate Freyna, and that is part of the reason I'm so excited for her. For external components for the mobbing build, you should rock 2-piece Venom Essence set, which gives you Toxic skill power, and 2-piece Annihilation, which gives you skill duration. I'm missing 1 piece of the Venom Essence set just because I really love my Annihilation sensor, which is max MP recovery in combat. This is kind of like the god tier role for Freyna, but the reason you want to use the top part of Venom Essence and the sensor for Venom Essence is simply because of the way that they roll. So if we go to access info, we can see that the Venom set, the only part, so this part rolls with max shield, defense, and HP. So we absolutely want to wear the processor for Venom Essence. And then for the Annihilation set, only the memory and the processor roll max HP as a implicit. So you'd want to go Venom Essence processor, Annihilation memory, Venom Essence sensor, and then Annihilation power. The reason we want Annihilation power over Venom Essence power is because the Venom Essence power rolls with shield, which we do not care about on Freyna. For bossing, in my opinion, the most important mod for Freyna is Neurotoxin Synthesis. This is a mod that allows her to activate her damage much more easily. If you remember in the first Freyna build that we did, I had a bossing and a ranged bossing. The ranged bossing would use range mods. So that the idea of the build was you'd shoot your 4 at an enemy near the boss, and then you'd be able to spread this poison damage, which is a 471% modifier that would spread to the boss, and then you'd shoot the boss with the weapon, and you'd be able to get this poison damage and the damage of your weapon. The thing that neurotoxin synthesis does, which is so incredible, is it changes so that your poisons don't spread, or room 0 trauma doesn't spread poison, but it massively increases the damage of room 0 trauma. So without neurotoxin synthesis, this is dealing 80% continuous damage as room 0 trauma. With neurotoxin synthesis, this is dealing 553% base damage modifier, and this allows us to just focus on hitting as hard as possible, as often as possible with her 4. Now, this is the build that I was rocking for the kills in the boss kills in the showcases. This is not super min-maxed. Once again, I'm dealing with the restrictions of having to build for both mobbing and bossing. Just to show you, if we could have like a perfect setup right now, this is what I would use. The big differences between what I would use ideally versus what I have right now is I only have 3 crit mods on my current build. I would like to get 4 crit mods. Crit is the best way to increase Freyna's damage past getting her modifier and power and dangerous ambush. Freyna has pretty terrible crit chance, but unfortunately there's not that many mods that we can use to really increase her damage, and so building 4 crit mods are the best way to scale her 4 past the initial modifier and power increases. We're going to be using skill simplification for the max amount of modifier, maximize skill for as much power as we can get, dangerous ambush to give us even more power when the boss is down, 4 crit mods, spear and shield for more power. The big thing is we're going to prioritize power over modifier for her 4, because the 4 already has really high modifier with neurotoxin synthesis, so power is going to be more impactful. We absolutely need a skill extension mod because we're going to be firing 89 rounds out of the 4, and so we don't want to run out of the duration of the 4 and not be able to shoot all of our bullets. So extra duration is super important, and then we can also use things like Battle of Stamina for a little bit more duration, and that is kind of the build. As you can see, I'm pretty close to my perfect build, but not quite, so that's kind of what I wanted to show you this setup here. Almost as important for Freyna's 4 damage as her mods is the mods on her weapon. Now, the 4 is affected by 2 different things on your weapon, and that is your rounds, or your magazine size, and your fire rate. So if you're going to use a weapon with Freyna's 4, there's 3 things that you absolutely must have, which is fire rate up, which increases your fire rate, expand weapon charge, which gives you more rounds per mag, and magazine compulsion, which gives you even more rounds per mag at the cost of some weak point damage. Magazine compulsion is the best that I could find in terms of increasing your mag size. Obviously, we don't care about the less weak point damage. It's not going to affect the gun. Now, once you get these 3 on, you have a choice between 2 ultimate mods that you can use. And those are Sharp Precision Shot, which works the same way that it does for Lepic. You can click your 4, hold it down, and then while you're firing it, you're going to build up more fire rate, and this will allow you to pump out more bullets faster, giving you the same amount of damage but over a shorter window. Or you can use Firing Fiesta. Now, Firing Fiesta reads that when you reload, your rounds are not consumed for 3 seconds. If you reload your main weapon and then immediately pull out your 4, you're able to shoot for 3 seconds, or probably about 2 seconds, with not consuming ammo, which allows you to deal more damage of your 4. Now, in terms of testing between Firing Fiesta and Sharp Precision Shot, I found Firing Fiesta, if you were lacking a bit of damage, was better, because it'll actually extend the amount of bullets that you get to fire in the 4, directly increasing your damage. Sharp Precision Shot gives you more fire rate. You're still locked to the same amount of bullets, so it doesn't actually increase your damage. However, it does give you more bullets fired when the boss goes down, and obviously for bossing, we're going to be rocking Dangerous Ambush, So when the boss is down, you get more bullets out in that time window. So it's pretty close. I found I was getting more consistent kills with firing Fiesta rather than sharp precision shot, getting those extra rounds for the like whole fight. But these are two mods that you can mess around with. Both are really good. Specifically for bossing, you're going to want to use the Slayer set. It gives you a ton of extra power. Slayer set is basically best in slot for almost any Descendant that is going to be using their abilities to kill bosses, just because the 26% power is massive. And so Slayer is what we're going to be rocking on Freyna. Obviously, if you're going to be going into group play and the boss is not dying in the duration of your 4, Slayer set can be pretty tricky because it reduces your survivability so much. Unfortunately, with Freyna, in order to like properly squeak out enough damage with our 4, you do a lot of times need to sacrifice. Like on our maximized build, we're going to be using the thing that gives us 50% more cooldown, so you would just kind of jump off the edge and then reset, so you dying doesn't really matter. In fact, if you die, you get your 4 back, so sometimes dying on Freyna is actually a positive, but it's not something that I really want to highlight. But it just kind of is the fact that her 4 is on one of the longest cooldowns in the game, and so getting it on a low cooldown can be pretty tough. I'm hoping the ultimate Freyna Transcendent mods can help with that, but Slayer set reducing our survivability is not the worst thing for Freyna. It's also very possible, because the new boss, that's a new Colossus, is toxic, that we get a new component set specifically for Freyna that just power creeps anything that we're using right now in the new season. So just keep that in mind. That might be a way that we're going to be building Freyna for Ultimate Freyna. We'll obviously have to wait and see, but just something to keep in mind. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Obviously, with Ultimate Freyna right around the corner, I really wanted to showcase not only some cool synergies on her, but what you want to be looking out for. I wanted this to be more of a guide on things to get you prepped for her launch. Obviously, we have no idea what she's actually going to be coming with, but getting these mods leveled, getting our reactors really nice, and starting to get some good components for her will all help you and only make you better on Freyna for when she actually does come out. And then I do plan on releasing a like full ultimate Freyna guide, but I wanted to get this out because a big part of this is I keep getting asked like, oh, are you going to use the Python or the Fallen Hope for your Freyna build? And I'm using the Secret Garden. I do think that is the best in slot weapon. So a big thing to get prepped is trying to get that rank 4 Secret Garden, which is a tough farm, but definitely something that's going to be super helpful for her. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I will catch you all in the next one. Take care. Peace.